Good afternoon, everyone, again. Well, I'm known as Oluwasefunmi Alabi. I mean, at least that's what the biometric authentication system at the door thinks. But let's be real. If someone lost, or if you lost your password today, would you change it? And, if I think the possible answer would be yes. But if you lost your face or if you lost your identity today, what would you do? You can't grow a new one, can you? No. So the whole context of my presentation today, is just to show you how the almighty biometric authentication systems aren't asking the question, who are you? But, they're rather asking, do you look enough like the JPEG we have on file? And that understanding, it's basically what brings us to know that I am not who I am. Quick introduction about me. The community knows me as Shay or MOJ. I love freedom and technology. I have a cybersecurity academy, which I just started off. We build CTF labs and assessments for people who are just joining cybersecurity and also those who are looking to upskill hands-on technical knowledge. I'm a senior security engineer at Amazon, ex-TikTok, and Central Bank of Ireland. So why biometrics, basically? We can tell that biometrics are both for convenience and security. In today's world, we all have smartphones where you just, from the swipe of it, your device is opened. It's basically increasing the numbers of traditional authentication systems like passwords and PINs. And it's basically Guidewire said it has a market projection of over $70 billion by the end of 2030. So there's a rapid adoption of this biometric technology. And humans have, we've used features such as the faces, the voice, gaits, even your earlobes, the ear size, the iris, to identify, and recognize each other for years. But only recently have we been able to use biometric-based systems to authenticate individuals. And the reason for this is biometrics are meant to be you as your password. But when, you look at it and you ask yourself, but what happens when you can't be faked? Or what happens when you are fake? And with the adoption that is rising, using fingerprints to unlock the applications and various other technology or things out there, we can't really trust the non-replicable identity that is being challenged in this situation. Moving on, when we speak about biometrics, we're going to talk in-depthly about the types of biometrics. First, we have, fingerprint recognition, like we have the facial recognition, we have iris retina scanning. Basically, biometrics is, the science of establishing or determining an identity based on the physical or behavioral traits of a particular individual. So fingerprints, DNA, signatures, iris, face, voice, so many, vein patterns, even the shape of your ears and more are all part of biometric systems. So we have a vast range of that. And how biometric works, basically, I would explain from this little flowchart we have. Don't let it confuse you. The biometric systems are essential, pattern recognition systems, that they read from the top there. The user, we have the enrollment phase there where the user signs up on the system. And on the fingerprint scanner, we have a biometric sensor which picks the imprint from the finger and sends it for feature extraction. While that is moved to the identity part, it identifies the user and stores whatsoever it has in the database in a stored template, and then moves to the authentication part of the system where the user is authenticated by same biometric sensors and feature extraction. Now it asks, the very important part is this decision-making part. So it asks, if it's a match in the system. If it's a match, definitely it gets you access to whatsoever you're requesting. And if it's not a match, it goes through the whole process again to re-authenticate you. So the actual question that the biometric or what the actual biometric recognition system is doing is just checking your input with whatsoever is stored to be able to to quantify for similarity and various other patterns just to grant you access. Now we know that. Fingerprint recognition on its own. We have cups, we have various items whereby, moisture and grease, as soon as you grab on them, your fingerprint is imprinted on them. And deliberate impressions on the, entire fingerprint can be obtained by ink, by grease for other substances also. But when you look at how fingerprints works themselves, on each person's finger, the fingerprint is, is an impression that is left by the friction of ridges. The ridges are just the elevated lines on your skin that actually grants the print. The human fingerprints are detailed and they are nearly unique per individual. When I say nearly unique, is because the biometric recognition systems also does, it has like an algorithm that checks for similarity. So if we're able to spoof or able to do particular kinds of attacks on the biometric system, we can as well almost get access into the system. And the fingerprint scanner, basically, just see it as a super smart camera that looks at, imagine your fingerprints, the delves on your fingers are like roads or like streets. Some of them are broken, some of them are split into two, but then the fingerprint scanner checks, it's just like a super big camera that checks each of these roads, each of these junctions to see various patterns, and using those patterns is able to then do analysis on that. Now, this kind of remembers how far apart these sports are, and where they are exactly. So when next you come in after you're enrolled in and you log in, it already just checks from the database to be sure that everything matches and grants you access. The threat surface, basically, you will look at what kind of attacks can happen on biometric systems. And some of them, each biometric system has its own unique vulnerability. Think of lifted fingerprints, from a glass. That's basically an example of the spoofing part of the attack. So we have fake fingerprints, we have fake faces, we have fake voices. Right now, we basically have, deep faked replays attack. We also have AI-powered recognition systems that can perform adversarial attacks. We also have, sensor vulnerabilities and AI model manipulation for some of the hardware that are out there that don't meet certain specifications and certain standards. Some of the, the sensors can be spoofed and can be manipulated. And moving on from that, we're just going to go a little bit deeper into the kind of attacks that we would have. So like I said, there are many different fingerprint sensors on the market. First off, we have the optical sensor. The optical fingerprint sensor in this case is one of the oldest method of, capturing and comparing fingerprints. And this technique basically just does, it basically uses an algorithm, to detect usual patterns of the surface, by analyzing the lightest and darkest part of the optical image. And then the second one we have, which is the capacitive sensors. Basically, instead of creating the traditional image of the fingerprint, the capacitive sensors stores capacitance on the device. So when the finger is placed on it, the charge is read and stored in the capacitor. It will change slightly in the database. And then this is used to generate the image and to actually check for similarities. And then the last part, which is the newest kid in the block, ultrasonic sensors. It captures the details of the fingerprint. So basically, the hardware consists of an ultrasonic transmitter and receiver. So when you put your finger on the fingerprint reader, basically, an electronic pulse is sent to your finger. Some part of it is absorbed, and some part bounces back on the sensor, and that is used to then calculate similarities for that. Now, because of this kind of sensors, because they are very different kind of sensors in the market, we have various kinds of attacks. And the most recent ones, or the most ones you see, are presentation attacks. Basically, there is a type of direct attack that are performed on the sensor level. So the sensor is fooled rather than, being replaced or being tampered with. You're just seeing a vulnerability and you're just fooling it. And then the other parts where the attacks can happen are the indirect parts, basically through communication channels. You can, modify biometric samples. Also from the database storage part, you can also use adversarial AI to deceive the machine learning decision engine at the back end. So these are possible attacks that attacks on biometric systems, and I'll be showing you an example of one of these in the demo. But when we look at real-world biometric failures, we can see examples of like researchers being able to bypass Apple Face ID, with mask and closed eye patches. We can also see, deepfaked voices and videos of facial movements being used to bypass authentication systems. And we've also seen adversarial patches introduced into biometric systems that have been used to manipulate them. An example, these are just some of the top cases that we've seen in 2024 and 2025 across boards. And we also have some that have used the 2D, 3D mask printing, to actually bypass biometric systems. And for the defense strategies that we'll be talking about, yes, we have a point where you have to incorporate liveliness detection for the fingerprint, so it's smart. Movements, warmth, blinking, pulse, pupil dilation is basically behavioral pattern recognitions. But while this is also implemented, we have to also follow the security principles of defense in depth. So having multimodal systems, dual factor authentication or dual forms of biometric authentication, like something you have, something you own, a face, a voice, a PIN. And then also AI-driven spook detection and logging and monitoring on whatsoever system is being deployed is also part of those that are important. Yes, biometric behavioral analysis is promising, and it's harder, but it's harder to mimic, but it raises concern, over things like false positives. So regardless of what systems you're choosing to implement or what systems you're choosing as your defense strategies, you have to consider all those in place. I'll be moving quickly to the live demo here. For the purpose of this live demo, a request was made to the NSIT database, special database, to use some of the fingerprints there. I'll be speaking basically about an adversarial patch, that can sort of be integrated into a system that would mislead or would basically deceive the system with manipulated and enhanced fingerprints. So you're going to be seeing the old fingerprints being manipulated and being modified and then used to try and log into the system. So let me just... And by the way, I like to push the production on Friday with my full chest. So let's hope this works. So the first thing here, let me show you this folder. Oh, yes, we can see it. Perfect. So I'm just going to take this off, all this files in here. Okay. I'm just going to run this. So what this does is we have the data set gotten from the NIST database. We have the original fingerprints that are not fully enhanced. Some of them have flaws in them, but what this tool does is it picks that fingerprint, enhances and modifies it. It does a similarity test, then passes it through the authentication system to try and get access. So it has processed 9 original images. Let's just see them. Enhancement successful. So yeah, single enhanced. Let's look at this one. So these are the single image. This is the enhanced version. And then let me show you the original version. There we go. So we have these two side by side. And then we're going to try to, I'm just going to run this also on the background. Okay, yeah, there we go. So we can just see these side by side, and we can see that some part of this one is broken, some parts are dark, some parts, they just have like flaws in there. And this software has enhanced this to use to bypass the authentication system. So I'm just going to show you that. The biometric authentication system, play. Now, what we have here, so it loads the original file into the database. The original files are already in the database, and each of the fingerprints that have been uploaded, that have been enhanced, are checked across everything in the database for similarity checks. And it gives us an actual status to see if it's granted access or not, based on the similarity level. And this was implemented here. Okay, so here we can see that the database stored, this is the fingerprint, the first fingerprint stored in the database. And this was the enhanced fingerprint that was used to check. And we have a percentage score of 79. Basically, this was programmed to have a pass rate of 70% acceptance rate. So it depends on also how you tweak and you tune your authentication systems and the decision logic behind it to accept the level of false positives or false negatives in your system. And we also have this enhanced fingerprint here that also has a 79. So these two fingerprints are most likely going to get us access into the system. And we have an aggregated result here that says 2 out of the 10 images that we tried were able to successfully pass the system. Now, if you look at this, for example, even though the image was it was modified and enhanced, we don't have a direct match in any of the entries in the database. So this gives us the threshold of the logic that we can set on, like I mentioned, the acceptance criteria for your decision logic or the system. That's just basically about the demo. Going back into the slides just quickly to round it up. Yes. So the future of identity, in this case, we know that biometrics can't be changed once it's leaked. And we know that each system has their own risk, and resilience, basically. So fingerprints are static and they can be easily replaced when stolen. So what should you do? You should have multi-factor authentications. You should have zero trust systems if need be. Biometric data permanence also, and ethical issues might arise in terms of your retention policies around keeping some of these things. So have guidelines, have policies, acceptable use policies, and retention policies on how you keep the data. Also, exploration of decentralized storage for the future. Blockchain, in this case, might come in very handy for some future development and integrations. And basically, biometrics, like I said, are promising, but they're harder to mimic, and they raise concerns over false positives. Key takeaways basically will be always assume that spoofing is possible and also test for it. So whatsoever you deploy in your system, whatsoever your authentication systems will always make sure that an assessment is done extensively. Also have layered defense is very critical. Not just the traditional multi-factor authentication, but for biometric system, liveliness is very, very important. Also red teaming and staying ahead of the learning curve. With that brings me to my end of presentation, and I'll be open to answering any questions. Thank you.